guys. I hope everyone's doing well. I miss y'all. I wanted to go ahead and finish reading Because of Winn-Dixie. I know we were all into Because of Winn-Dixie and excited about finding out what was going to happen next in the story. We ended on chapter 14. And those of you that have joined my Zoom video meetings, we have actually finished chapter 15 through 17, and I was going to start chapter 18. Since a lot of you have not been able to come to the Zoom meetings, which is perfectly fine, I wanted to go ahead and do the rest of the read alouds for the chapters for you so that you can enjoy the rest of the story. So I'm going to first start out with just a little review of what we learned in chapter 14. In chapter 14, Opal was confiding in Gloria about Otis being a criminal. Remember, he had mentioned that to her whenever she was at the pet store. And of course, Otis seemed very nice, had always been very nice to her, did not act like a criminal at all, but she just kind of felt like she needed to tell an adult. So she confided in Gloria, and Gloria took Opal to her bottle tree. And if you remember, Gloria told Opal that the reason she kept the bottle tree was to keep the ghost away, to remind her of all the bad things that she had done. And she gave Opal some really good advice. She told Opal to not judge people on what they had already done. So not to judge people on their past, but to focus on who they are now and to judge them by what they are now. Gloria says, it's different for everyone. You find out on your own, but in the meantime, you got to remember, you can't always judge people by the things they done. You got to judge them by what they are doing now. You judge Otis by the pretty music he plays and how kind he is to them animals, because that's all you know about him right now, all right? Yes, ma'am, I said. And them Dewberry boys, you try not to judge them too harsh either, all right? All right, I said. All right then, said Gloria Dump, and she turned and started walking away. Winn-Dixie nudged me with his wet nose and wagged his tail. When he saw I wasn't going, he trotted after Gloria. I stayed where I was and studied the tree. I wondered if my mama, wherever she was, had a tree full of bottles, and I wondered if I was a ghost to her, the same way she sometimes seemed like a ghost to me. Guys, we had discussed in class that based on what Gloria teaches Opal, that we can tell that she is a very wise lady. She's learned from her mistakes. She has a big heart. She wants Opal to reach out to the Dewberry boys and to be friends with them, even though they haven't always been nice to her. Gloria's sort of serving like a mother role model to her, like a grandmother to her, giving her good advice. And then in chapter 15, we learn that Miss Franny actually suggests a book for Opal called Gone with the Wind, and it was about the Civil War. Opal reaches out to Miss Franny and tells her that she wants to get a book that she can read to Gloria. Remember, Gloria can't see very well. Remember, she said she sees people with her heart. Something else that let us know that Gloria doesn't judge people by how they look, but thinks about who they are on the inside. So I'm going to start off with chapter 15. So those of you who've already listened to me read it, you may want to skip this video. I'm going to read chapter 15 and 16 in this video, and then 17 in the next one, probably 17 and 18 in the next one. Chapter 15. The Herman W. Block Memorial Library's air conditioning unit didn't work very good, and there was only one fan, and from the minute me and Winn-Dixie got in the library, he hogged it all. He lay right in front of it and wagged his tail and let it blow his fur all around. Some of his fur was pretty loose and blew right off of him like a dandelion puff. I worried about him hogging the fan, and I worried about the fan blowing him bald. But Miss Franny did not said not to worry about either thing, that Winn-Dixie could hog the fan if he wanted, and she had never in her life seen a dog made bald by a fan. Sometimes when Miss Franny was telling a story, she would have a fit. They were small fits, and they didn't last long. But what happened was she would forget what she was saying. She would just stop and start to shake like a leaf. And when that happened, Winn-Dixie would get up from the fan and sit right at Miss Franny Block's side. He would sit up tall, protecting her, with his ears standing up straight on his head like soldiers. And when Miss Franny stopped shaking and started talking again, Winn-Dixie would lick her hand and lie back down in front of the fan. Whenever Miss Franny had one of her fits, it reminded me of Winn-Dixie in a thunderstorm. There were a lot of thunderstorms that summer. And I got real good at holding on to Winn-Dixie whenever they came. I held on to him and comforted him and whispered to him and rocked him just the same way he tried to comfort Miss Franny when she had her fits. Only I held on to Winn-Dixie for another reason, too. I held on to him tight so he wouldn't run away. It all made me think about Gloria Dump. I wondered who comforted her when she heard those bottles knocking together, those ghosts chattering about the things she had done wrong. I wanted to comfort Gloria Dump, and I decided that the best way to do that would be to read her a book. Read it to her loud enough to keep the ghost away. And so I asked Miss Franny, I said, Miss Franny, I've got a grown-up friend whose eyes are going on her, and I would like to read her a book out loud. Do you have any suggestions? Suggestions, Miss Franny said. Yes, ma'am, I have suggestions. Of course I have suggestions. How about Gone with the Wind? What's that about? I asked her. Why, said Miss Franny, it's a wonderful story about the Civil War. Civil War, I asked. Do not tell me you have never heard of the Civil War. Miss Franny Block looked like she was going to faint. She waved her hands in front of her face. I know about the Civil War, I told her. That was the war between the South and the North over slavery. Slavery, yes, said Miss Franny. It was also about states' rights and money. It was a terrible war. My great-grandfather fought in that war. He was just a boy. Your great-grandfather? Yes, ma'am, Litmus W. Block. Now there's the story. Winn-Dixie yawned real big and lay down on his side with a thump and a sigh. I swear he knew that phrase. Now there's the story. And he knew it meant we weren't going anywhere real soon. Go ahead and tell it to me, Miss Franny, I said. And I sat down cross-legged next to Winn-Dixie. I pushed him and tried to get him to share the fan. But he pretended he was asleep and he wouldn't move. I was all settled in and ready for a good story when the door banged and pinch-faced Amanda Wilkinson came in. Winn-Dixie sat up and stared at her. He tried out a smile on her, but she didn't smile back, and so he lay down again. I'm ready for another book, Amanda said, slamming her book down on Miss Franny's desk. Well, said Miss Franny, maybe you wouldn't mind waiting. I am telling India Opal a story about my great-grandfather. You are? Of course, more than welcome to listen. It will be just 1 minute. Amanda sighed a real big dramatic sigh and stared past me. She pretended like she wasn't interested, but she was, I could tell. Come sit over here, said Miss Franny. I'll stand. Thank you, said Amanda. Suit yourself, Miss Franny shrugged. Now, where was I? Oh, yes, Litmus W. Block. Chapter 16. Litmus W. Block was just a boy when the firing on Fort Sumter occurred, Miss Franny Block said as she started in on her story. Fort Sumter, I said. It was the firing on Fort Sumter that started the war, said Amanda. Okay, I said. I shrugged. Well, Litmus was 14 years old. He was strong and big, but he was still just a boy. His daddy, Artley W. Block, had already enlisted, and Litmus told his mama that he could not stand and let the South get beat. And so he went to fight, too. Miss Franny looked around the library, and then she whispered, Men and boys always want to fight. They are always looking for a reason to go to war. It is the saddest thing. They have this abiding notion that war is fun, and no history lesson will convince them differently. Anyway, Litmus went and enlisted. He lied about his age. Yes, ma'am, like I said, he was a big boy, and the army took him, and Litmus went off to war just like that. Left behind his mother and 3 sisters. He went off to be a hero, but he soon found out the truth. Miss Franny closed her eyes and shook her head. What truth? I asked her. Why? That war is awful. Miss Franny said with her eyes still closed, pure awful. I stole a look at Amanda. Her face was pinched up even more than usual. War, said Miss Franny, with her eyes still closed, is just awful. She shook her head and opened her eyes. She pointed at me, and then she pointed at Amanda. You, neither of you can imagine. No, ma'am, Amanda and me said at exactly the same time. We looked real quick at each other and then back at Miss Franny. You cannot imagine. Litmus was hungry all the time, and he was covered with all manner of vermin, fleas and lice. And in the winter, he was so cold he thought for sure he would freeze to death. And in the summer, why, there's nothing worse than war in the summertime. It stinks so. And the only thing that made Litmus forget that he was hungry and itchy and hot or cold was that he was getting shot at. And he got shot at quite a bit. And he was nothing more than a child. Did he get killed? I asked Miss Franny. Good grief, said Amanda. She rolled her eyes. Now, Opal, Miss Franny said, I wouldn't be standing in this room telling this story if he was killed. I wouldn't exist. No, ma'am, he had to live, but he was a changed man. Yes, ma'am, a changed man. He walked back home when the war was over. He walked from Virginia all the way back to Georgia. He didn't have a horse. Nobody had a horse except for the Yankees. He walked, and when he got home, there was no home there. Where was it? I asked her. I didn't care if Amanda thought I was stupid. I wanted to know. Why, Miss Franny shouted so loud that Winn-Dixie and Amanda Wilkinson and me all jumped. The Yankees burned it. Yes, ma'am, burned it to the ground. What about his sisters? Amanda asked. She moved around the desk and came and sat on the floor. She looked up at Miss Franny. What happened to them? Dead. Dead of typhoid fever. Oh, no, Amanda said in a real soft voice. And his mama, I whispered. Dead, too. And his father, Amanda asked. What happened to him? He died on the battlefield. Litmus was an orphan, I asked. Litmus was an orphan, I asked. Yes, ma'am, said Miss Franny Block. Litmus was an orphan. This is a sad story, I told Miss Franny. It sure is, said Amanda. I was amazed that she was agreeing with me about something. I'm not done yet, Miss Franny said. When Dixie started to snore and I nudged him with my foot to try to make him quit, I wanted to hear the rest of the story. It was important to me to hear how Litmus survived after losing everything he loved. Boys and girls, I'm going to stop there and pick up with chapter 17 in the next video. But I want you to stop and think for a second. So Miss Franny is telling us this story about her great-grandfather going to war. And he was young. He was only 14, I believe, when he went off to war. And I can't find the page where I read that at. Maybe that was in another chapter. Anyway, how did this part make you feel? That would be the mood of the story. I know it made me feel very sad. I can't imagine if my husband or my son went off to war, how scared I would be. But also, if I was Litmus and came back and my family was dead, all of my family was dead. They died of it says his family died of the typhoid fever. I can't imagine how sad I would feel. So we know that in this part, the mood is depression and sadness. And I will pick up on the next video with chapter 17. Tune in.